What's up everybody, welcome back. So in today's video we're going to set up the weapons on our character. So for example, if I pick up the rifle, you can see the pistol appears on my hip. Well, you can kind of see it. And if I switch weapons, the rifle will appear on my back and the pistol in my hands. So we do not actually have proper animations to switch weapons to our back. So that's a little bit of a downer, but we can make sure that everything shows up correctly. So for example, if we have two primary weapons, those will show up on my back and then the pistol will show up on my hip. So that's what we're going to take a look at today. If you like the series, please consider leaving a like, and if you want to get your hands on the project files, you can become a member of the YouTube channel or become a Patreon, and then you will get access to the downloads of this project as well. So with all of that stuff out of the way, let's dive into today's video. So let's start with showing the weapons on the character's back, and we're going to add sockets for that. So because we're not animating any of these sockets, we can use actual sockets we add in Unreal, and otherwise we need to add bones in Blender. So the sockets is the easier option in this case. So let's go to characters, heroes, mannequins, meshes, and we want to open up our skeleton. So we need to make sure that we add a socket for each weapon that we can add to the character's model. So I'm going to start with the one for the pistol, and I'm going to add it to the thigh left. So I'm going to right click on the thigh left bone, and then I'm going to add a socket. So we can rename it. So right now it's called thigh socket. So we're going to name this holster socket. And then _0. So this is for weapon slot 0, which is our secondary weapon, our pistol. And now to make things easier, we can attach the mesh in here. So if we right click, go to add preview asset, then we can add a mesh to our socket. So we want to add our pistol. And then we can make sure everything is aligned properly. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you could take as long as you want. So we're going to move it to the side a bit and then rotate it. And rotate it down a little and move it a bit closer to the hip. So this is our pistol socket, and then I want to add two of the primary weapons to the back of the character. So for this we're going to add sockets to the spine 05 bone, so spine 05. Let's right click this one, we're going to add a socket again. And let's rename it. So this is our holster socket _1. And again, we can attach a mesh over here. So let's attach the shotgun or rifle, for example. So the SK rifle. And let me see. Is it this one? No. Over here. There we are. And now you can align it however you want. So let's make it something like this. And again, you can spend as much time as you want to make this look good, but for the sake of keeping this video a little bit acceptable length, I'm not going to spend too much time. So I'm just going to move it in place over here. And something like that will have to do for now. And then we can add a second socket to our spine 5 bone for the other primary weapon. So again, let's right click, add a socket, and this time it's going to be our holster socket _2. And let's make sure that we have this one aligned as well. So let's add the shotgun over here. There we go. And now let's align everything. Let's keep it like this and then rotate it 90 degrees. Well, 100 degrees, that works. And just move it in place. So something like this. And there we have our sockets ready to go. So right now we can remove all of the attached assets and that will get rid of the weapons. So we are back to normal. So let's save and close it down, and now we can add some stuff to our character blueprint. So let's open up our base character, and in here we're going to create a new function to make our weapon show. So let's create a new function. I'm going to call this holster weapon, and we're going to give this 2 inputs. So we're going to start with the weapon row name. That's a name variable. And then we also want to add a boolean, and I'm going to call this unholster and turn it into a boolean. So we're going to add a branch in here, and we're going to use this boolean to determine if we want to stow the weapon or we want to actually show it. So if it's already on the character and we're selecting the weapon, we need to remove it. So that's what we're checking over here. So if this is false, we're actually storing the weapon. And we're going to make a few checks in here. So first, let's get a branch, plug it in here, and we want to grab our weapon inventory names and get our current weapon. So let's get a copy and plug in our active weapon index. So we're simply going to make sure that the weapon we're storing is not our active weapon. So let's drag off the weapon row name and compare it to our active weapon. And if this is true, we're not going to do anything. So we're simply going to return from the function. So let's drag off here and grab a return node. So if this is false, then we can grab another check in here. And we want to make sure that we don't already have the weapon on our back. So we're going to create an array. And that's going to, okay, it didn't create one. There we go. And that's going to be our holstered weapon names. So we're going to turn this into an array of names. So name variable and make it an array. So we're going to check if the weapon we want to store is not already in here. So let's drag it in and we're going to find an item. So we can simply plug in the weapon row name from the input of the function. And then if this returns -1, that means the weapon is not in this array yet. So we're going to drag off here and do is less than. And if this is less than 0, that means we want to actually store the weapon. So we're going to plug this into a new branch, plug this one into the false pin of the previous branch. And if this actually returns false, then we also want to return. So the weapon is already shown on the character and we don't want to spawn a second one. So if this is true, then we actually need to add the weapon. So we're going to drag off here and we're going to get a table row name. Sorry. So for the data table row, we want to select our weapon info table. And again, we're going to plug in the weapon row name from the input of the function. So we have the current weapon information. We can drag off the out row and we're going to break it. So we want to know the weapon mesh, so we can store it on the character's back. And we're going to promote this to a local variable for now. So drag off here, promote to local variable, and that's our weapon mesh. Plug it into the row found pin. Then we're going to scroll down a little bit, and in the weapon info table, we also have an enumeration for our weapon type. So we're going to drag off here, and we're going to look for a switch. So this tells us if this is a primary or a secondary weapon. And our secondary weapons are our pistols. So we can use this to set up the slot we want to use. And for the slot, we also want to use a local variable. So let's create one. And this is going to be our local holster socket. So this is a name variable, but it's not an array. So let's turn it into a single name. And then we're going to drag it in here. So if this is our secondary weapon, that means it's our pistol. So we want to use our holster socket _0. So the one we added to the thigh of the character. And then if this is a primary weapon, we need to make sure that we don't already attach it to the socket that has a weapon. So we're going to add a second array in here, and we need it anyway for the meshes that are stored on the character's back, so the actual mesh components. So let's add a new array again, and this is going to be our holstered weapons. So turn it into a skeletal mesh component. Let's see, skeletal mesh component over here. And then we want to turn it into an array. So we have an array of skeletal mesh components. Now we're going to drag it in here. And we want to drag off the array and check for is valid index. So we're going to check if index 1 is valid or not. Grab a branch. So if this index is valid, that means we already have a weapon there, and then we don't want to use that index. So we can drag off the true pin, and then we're going to set our holster socket to holster socket _2. And if this is false, we're going to use our holster socket 1. So this should be 2, and the false pin should be 1. And this will determine the correct socket. So then we also want to set an array index for our holstered weapons array. So we're going to make that a local variable and call that local array index. So turn this one into a single integer. And again over here we just want to set them by hand. So we're going to drag in 3 setters and we're going to paste them 3 times. So the first one is going to be 0 and then 1 or 2. So 0, and then we have, well, let's make a match. So we have 1 over here, so we're going to make this 1, and then we're going to make this one 2. There we go. It doesn't really matter, but okay. And so after we have all of this information, we're going to drag off and we're going to add a skeletal mesh component. Select this node and make sure that we plug in all 3 branches. So first of all, we want to enable manual attachment. So let's make sure we have this box ticked. And then we're going to attach it to our character mesh. So let's do that first. We're going to drag off the return value and we're going to attach a component to component. Oh, really? So attach component to component, not actor to component. The target is the return value, so that's correct. You can leave that pin plugged in. And for the parent, we want to select our character mesh. So let's drag that one in. Then we can use the socket name from our local holster socket. So we're going to plug this one in here. Make sure that we have the location snap to target and the rotation snap to target as well. And then we need to make sure that we set the actual mesh of the weapon. So we can drag off the return value again. And we want to set a skeletal mesh. So if you're using Unreal 5.1, this node is called skeletal mesh asset, but it works the same. So set skeletal mesh asset or set skeletal mesh if you're in 5.0. So we're going to select this one, plug it in, and we can grab the mesh again from our local variables and plug it in. So that's good to go as well. And then all we need to do is make sure that we have a reference to this in our arrays, so we can get rid of it later if we want to. So we're going to drag in our holstered weapons array and we're going to set an array element. Plug it in. So for the index, we're going to use our local array index. And then the item is the return value from the add skeletal mesh component node. So plug this one into the item, make sure we enable size to fit, and we want to do the same thing for the other array. So that's going to be our weapon names, the holstered weapon names. Also set an array element, also use the local index, make sure you enable size to fit, and for this we want to plug in the actual name from the input of the function. So let's drag it all the way over here and plug it into the item. And then we should be good to go for this branch. So we're going to grab our return node and we're going to make sure that we plug it in over here as well. There we go. And now all that's left is the other branch in here. So this is the branch for the weapon that we are selecting and we want to remove from the character's mesh. So from the first branch that we added from the true pin that's where we want to continue. And first we want to check if our array of holstered weapons is not empty. So we're going to grab a branch in here, plug it into the true pin. So this can happen the first time when we spawn and we only have one weapon. We're gonna select that weapon and the select function will call this function. So we need to make sure that we don't stow the weapon if we only have one. So we're gonna grab our holstered weapon names array, drag it in here, and we're gonna make sure that it's not empty. And then plug it into the boolean, the branch, sorry. And that should be good. Then we want to grab our local array index and we're going to grab a setter. So we need to plug the true pin of the branch into the setter. And for the false pin, we want to go to the return node. So that's actually this execution pin over here. That comes from the true branch for the weapon inventory names active weapon index slot. So we can plug the false pin of this branch in here as well. So we're simply going to return and do nothing. So for the setter of the local array index, we're going to use our holstered weapon names, drag it in, and we're going to find an item again. So find item. And then we want to plug in the weapon row name from the function. So plug this one into the array index, and then we simply can check if this is greater than or equal to 0. So plug it into a branch. And if the weapon is not in the array, this will return -1. So then we know if we have the weapon on the character or not. So we're going to do greater than or equal to, make sure that we have this set to 0, plug it into the condition. So if this returns false, then again, we don't need to do anything. So we're going to plug this into the execution pin over here and go to the return node. And if this one returns true, then we simply want to get rid of this skeletal mesh component. So then we can grab our holstered weapons array. We're going to get a copy. And we're going to get the copy from the local array index. And then we can simply destroy the component. So drag off here and destroy component. This goes into the true pin over here. And then we need to make sure that we make sure the arrays match up. So we're going to grab our holstered weapons array. And again, we're going to set an array element. Plug it in over here. So the local array index goes into the index. And then we're simply going to leave the item empty. Make sure we have size to fit enabled. And we're going to grab our holstered weapon names and do the same thing. So again, we're going to set an element. Plug it in, grab the local array index. We're going to leave the item empty and make sure we have size to fit enabled. So that's the other branch, and then we can return. So we can grab this execution pin over here and plug it in. And this should be our holster weapon function. So if we compile and save, then we can go to event graph and we want to go to our multicast select weapon function. So over here, yeah, multicast. We need the multicast event. Let me double check. Yeah, we're going to add it to the multicast select weapon function over here. So first of all, we're going to grab our holster weapon function, drag it in here. And we simply want to unholster the weapon that we're selecting. So we're going to grab the weapon row name and we're going to plug it in and make sure we have unholster enabled. And after that, we're going to grab a for each loop, plug it in. We're going to plug in our weapon inventory names. And we simply want to holster them. So we're going to grab our holster weapon function, plug it in. This time we want to holster them. So we need to make sure unholster is false and grab the array element for the weapon name. So if we already have the weapon, this is not going to do anything. So this should be all we need to do. So right now we can run a little test in between to see if this is working. But before I forget, we actually need to change something inside of our find weapon slot function. So let's open this one up. And in here I found a little bug that wasn't really a bug before. But we need to make sure we change it to make everything work. So right at the end over here, we have a branch that checks for the local slot to add weapon if it's greater than or equal to our active weapon index. And in this case, we need to make sure that we pop this out for an equal to. So let's get rid of the greater than or equal and then simply plug in an equal one and replace the condition. And this should make everything work. So now we're ready for a little test. So let's make sure everything is working in a multiplayer game. So I'm gonna set this up quickly. Let me see, select a different profile, host game, and then search for game as well. So let's make sure that one of the characters has a secondary weapon, or a primary actually. So this one should have the rifle on the back when he spawns. And then for the other character, we're only gonna set up a pistol. So this one doesn't have any weapons equipped in the other slots, and he should spawn without any extra weapons. So let's see if that's working, and then we're going to pick up a weapon from the level, and that should appear on his back as well. So there we go, the left guy has the rifle on the back, and that actually shows for both players, so that's good to go. And then if the green one picks up a rifle, so let's make sure the other guy sees it happening, then the pistol is going to appear on the hip of the character. So you can see that's over there as well. You can see it with the turn in place animations. So that's working, and if I switch weapons, then the rifle appears on the character's back and the pistol goes into the hands. So you need to keep in mind that we do not have the proper animations for it, so you can maybe retarget some animations from Mixamo or something like that if you want to actually have proper animations for it. So that's all I got for you guys today. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later guys, bye bye.